Hey everybody, I just wanted to talk to you today about this dilemma that some people seem to be in about the COVID vaccine, whether you should take the vaccine or not. There's different views on that, and I want to discuss the pros and the cons, so hopefully it can help you make a decision on what you should do if you haven't already decided. First of all, I want to mention to you about wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to consider the entire body of evidence concerning any matter, as we call it sometimes, the pros and the cons, and to come to a conclusion that's sensible, that's reasonable, a conclusion that's without emotional bias, and that is prudent to bring about the best possible result or outcome regarding the facts of the situation. In other words, that's what wisdom really does. It's not knee-jerk. It doesn't jump to conclusions based on its feelings, or it's not driven by only one side of the picture, but it looks at the whole picture. And the Bible instructs us as Christians to be wise, to be sensible, to be careful, to make just decisions in our judgments about things, and to love our neighbor as ourselves, and also as Christians to be in agreement as much as we humanly can, as much as possible, to be of one mind and one heart on any matter, to be in harmony together. So I realize that some of us are not in harmony about this question, and so I'm not trying to persuade you to do anything without faith. I just want to bring forth to you some facts and some information that might help you to come to what I call a reasonable conclusion. Yeah, there's lots of rumors out there. There's stuff all over the internet. There's social media. It's just full of all these different kinds of suggestions. I call them conspiracy theories about how dangerous the vaccine is and what it can cause and the things it can do and so forth. And I've looked at a lot of those opinions and those rumors and those conspiracy theories, and most of them, for the most part, don't really have any evidence to back them up. It's just stuff that people think could happen, or they think is going to be a long-term effect, or they think, according to some medical opinion by a doctor or some guy that's got a doctorate degree, or maybe he's in a good position and he has an opinion that's contrary to what most opinions are. But what I found out is that most of them are just haven't been proven yet, and of course they spread. People have a tendency to really gobble this stuff up, when it's negative, and it promotes fear and worry and doubt. And it's just like the Bible says about the tongue. It's like, it spreads like wildfire. The tongue does, and it spreads all kinds of stuff. And so we need to really think about everything we're seeing and hearing about this, and also look at the other facts that need to be considered as well. There's always been conspiracy theories around. There's always been conspiracy theories around. There's people that are certain that there are UFOs and that aliens are among us, and that people have been taken on, been abducted by aliens into spacecraft and been, looked at and turned loose. And there's all kinds of writings and all kinds of information out there that talk about it as though it were a fact, but the truth is we don't have an alien spaceship to go look at in a museum, and we don't have an alien body that we can examine. So we don't have proof, but we have some people that think there certainly are aliens among us. And then, of course, we got the Bigfoot theory. Sasquatch is called. He's supposed to be out there. And we found footprints, and we found some hair on some tree limbs, but we really never have gotten a body yet, or really gotten what would be considered serious, viable, provable pictures. But yet there are people that, there's forums about it. There's people that believe in Bigfoot. There's people out there searching for Bigfoot. There's people that write books about Bigfoot, but we don't really have proof of it, but it is a theory. And of course, there's all the thing about the medical dangers, and some people are anti-medicine, anti-doctor. Don't go to the doctor, don't take the medicine, because it can do this or do that. And then there's all kinds of people there's people that believe you can't eat certain foods because they're caused these certain medical conditions, and if you do get sick, you got to use all natural remedies. And there's so many there's people that are against any kind of vaccine at all, even though the whole world has been delivered from various other kinds of epidemics by vaccines, from smallpox to even when I was growing up, there was the polio there was a polio epidemic when I was a boy in the 50s, and people were, being crippled and diseased from polio, and it was a serious matter. And somebody came out with a vaccine, and I remember them giving me the vaccine when I was a kid, and it prevented me from getting polio, and I'm glad of that. But there's people that are against vaccines of any kind, and they only look at some of the negative things, and there's certainly some risk with any vaccine. There's some risk with any kind of medication. There's risk with any surgery. But overall, when you consider modern medicine and the lives it's saved and the misery that it's delivered people from, and the terrible diseases that it's cured, and when people have terrible accidents, the things they get when they get surgeries and bones fixed and bodies fixed. I mean, just think about all the good that's been done. You can't really just knock all medical. So it's just being fair in your judgment about things. And so as Christians, we need to not just look at the earth and what's on the earth and what we're hearing from the earth, but we need to look up above and think about what is God saying and what's the big picture and what does the Word of God say. And so, anyway, I want to just give you some facts that I've researched, and I'm not saying I know everything, and I'm certainly not, I don't have all knowledge, and you have to confirm these things. These are things mostly that I got off the internet, like everybody else gets stuff off the internet. Some of it may not be exactly perfectly true, but as best I can tell, it's pretty much factual. For an example, in the U.S., the COVID vaccinations now, there's been 194,346,486 people who had first doses of the COVID vaccine. There's been another 152,751,201 that had the second dose. That's been a total of 347,097,687 doses that have been administered just in the United States alone. And the fact is that for the most part, they've had very, very, very minor, very few reactions that are negative. If there was a lot of people having a lot of problems with this, I mean, like if it was really as bad as the conspiracy theories say, I mean, we would know it. We would know it by our neighbors. People we know they've had the vaccine. We would know it on the local news. We would know it here from the local hospital and so forth. It would be all around us. I mean, you couldn't hide this if there was a lot of bad stuff happening to people because they took the COVID shot. But it's just not out there. It's really not there. And of course, it'd be on a national basis and it'd be on an international basis. There would be reports coming from all over the world if this vaccine was really dangerous and causing a lot of problems. It's just not there. So I don't see the bulk of negative information like it's being presented. And then you consider worldwide, in the world on the global basis, there's been 2,237,241,330 first dose shots of COVID vaccine being given to people around the world. And then there's been another 1,199,069,769 second doses of the vaccine that's been given around the world, of the doses being given, the second time. And this comes to a total now worldwide of 3,436,311,099 doses. That's a lot of doses. Now, with that many having been spread around, the billions of doses, we would know if it was really a dangerous thing, if it's really causing a lot of problems. But again, this is where we have to use wisdom. Just putting all other information aside, just that one fact that there's that many of them been given out with very little negative response or reactions, that ought to say something. That ought to tell us a lot right there. Now, there are some cases where the vaccine has caused some problems. I mean, I'm not denying that, but they're very small in number. For an example, It's called anaphylaxis, I think it's called, if I'm saying that right, after having the COVID-19 vaccination. Says they are rare, but they do happen sometimes. And they do occur approximately. And you see, that's an allergic reaction. That's a serious allergic reaction. And it has occurred in 2 to 5 people per million that are vaccinated in the United States. So, well, that seems like a pretty small number. Well, I did some math on that, and that boils down to this. In decimals, it boils down to this. It boils down to 0.0000002 to 0.00005%, which means that's 2 to 5 over 100,000th of a percent. In other words, that's 2 to 5 100,000ths of 1%. That's almost unimaginably tiny. So, I hear all this stuff about, well, people having allergic reactions and so forth, but it's almost nobody compared to the numbers that have had the vaccination. There's also another report that I found is that out of 13 million doses that were followed of the J&J, that's the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine that was given in the United States, there were 39 confirmed reports of people who got what's called a TTS disease. It's a short for basically having blood clots. And so I did the math on that. That one comes up to 0.00003%. That means that's 3 100,000ths of a percent. That's 3 over 100,000th of 1%, which again is extremely tiny. That's very low risk. That's considering other things in our society that are risk, that have risk. That's almost nothing. And in another study that was done to date, there were only 2 confirmed cases of the TTS, that is the blood clotting situation, following the mRNA COVID-19 vaccination, which is basically like the Moderna or the Pfizer, as far as I understand. It's their version. That out of 328 million doses of this administered in the United States, there was only 2 cases of the TTS. And so basically it boils down with that particular vaccine, there's really no risk to speak of. When it boils down to that, it's a decimal point followed by 9 zeros and then a 6, which is like 6 1/billionth of 1% risk. I mean, it's so tiny, it's not even worth mentioning. And there are other reactions and there are other types of negative responses to the COVID-19 shot. And I read about several of them, and all of them fall into the very tiny, tiny, tiny percents like I've already given. They're all very, very tiny. None of them even reach even close to 1%. They're all very small fractions of a percent. And so these numbers are all consistent from everything I find with all the negative reactions of the COVID-19 shot, which boils down to almost nothing. Now, the rest of what people are saying is all speculation. In other words, they talk about long-term effects. Well, we don't know what the long-term effects are yet. That's true. It's just guessing what they might be, or what it might do if you are pregnant, or what it might do if you're this or that, if you take the shot. Those are just speculations because we don't have that information yet. So it's, again, those are just imaginations and guesstimations and speculations. But let me just tell you, just for practical purposes, let's just consider this. The risk of dying in a car accident is many, many times greater. It's hundreds, if not thousands, it's thousands of times greater than having a serious adverse reaction to a COVID vaccine. Because, you can look it up. People die every day from car accidents. You can go out here on the interstate on I-75, and there's a sign up that tells you how many thousand people have already died in Tennessee or Georgia this year from car accidents, not to mention the ones that have been maimed, injured, seriously injured, who've lost limbs or been paralyzed or had, long recovers in the hospital or crippled for the rest of their life, not to even mention all those thousands and thousands of people. So driving a car has a risk. Riding in a car has a risk. And those risks in the automobile, dying in an automobile accident are far greater than the risk of taking a COVID shot. Yet none of us are afraid to get in our cars and go down the road to the store or see our friends or go wherever we want to go. We don't even think anything. We do it without any hesitation. Here's the reason. We are not just looking at the statistics on the people that have been hurt, injured, paralyzed, seriously in comas, many thousands and thousands of people. I forget how I looked it up one time. It's hundreds of thousands of people die every year from car accidents. I think it's hundreds of thousands. It may be tens of thousands, but the point is it's a lot. And so if that's all we were focusing on was just a number of people dying in car accidents, not to mention the number of people who've been seriously injured or have been crippled for life or whatever because of car accidents, if that's all we focused on, and that's all we looked at, and that's all we thought about, and that's all we talked about, we'd be scared to death to get into a car and go anywhere, right? So, but on the other hand, if we're going to make a wise decision about whether we should ride in a car or not, then we would look at the billions of trips that have been taken without any incident at all, without a problem. So, again, pros and cons, you have to hold them up beside each other and look at the whole picture. So, anyway, in doing further research, I also found out that right now, 99% of COVID deaths, it's actually 99.2% of COVID deaths are a result of unvaccinated people. In other words, the 99% are with people who have not been vaccinated. And so now we have the Delta variant of the COVID-19 pandemic that's spreading around, and it's causing cases to rise at a rapid pace right now. And so now they're calling it, instead of the COVID pandemic like we had last year, it's now being called the COVID pandemic of the unvaccinated, because it's the unvaccinated now that the pandemic is running through. And we have something like 40 or 45% of Americans that have not been vaccinated, and they're the ones that are getting the COVID Delta variant for the most part. I'm not saying no one else is getting it. There are some cases where vaccinated people are getting it. There's some cases where vaccinated people are going to the hospital. But the people who are dying from it and who have chronic illness from it are almost exclusively only the unvaccinated. So, well, you might say, and I've heard this said, well, that's my personal decision whether I get vaccinated or not. Well, I agree with you to some degree. It is your personal decision. It is a personal decision in a way, but also in the sense that the fact that you may choose not to get vaccinated and then you may end up with COVID, which you probably will. In fact, I didn't say this. I also found out that COVID, the Delta variant of COVID now is spreading extremely fast because it's as contagious as chickenpox is. And everybody that's been unvaccinated, that has not been vaccinated, they say is going to get it sooner or later. Everybody that's been unvaccinated is going to get it because it's spreading like wildfire and it's extremely contagious. And without the vaccination, you're probably assuredly going to get it sooner or later. So when you say it's a personal decision, the thing about it is, if you don't get the vaccination and you get COVID-19, because you're going to be contagious, you're going to spread it to your family and friends and other people you come in contact with, and then you are sort of in a way responsible for what happens to them because you chose not to get the vaccine. Then when you think of it that way, is it really your personal decision? Is it just a personal decision then? Is it just about you? Or do you have to think about others? I mean, aren't we supposed to love our neighbors ourselves? I mean, I could say if you lived out on a desert island by yourself, you didn't go anywhere, you didn't see anybody, you didn't have anybody around you, it wouldn't matter, would it? It'd be your personal decision. But in the sense that you can affect other people, and it may cause them to have extreme illness, possibly to die, you can't say it's just a personal decision, can you, in that situation? That's something I had to think about when I took my vaccination. So anyway, another study that's been done, and I found this on the internet as well, where they studied 675 people who were fully vaccinated, and then they watched to see how many of those actually showed up with an infection of COVID later. It turns out that 7% of those actually had a breakout and had to go to the hospital. So 7% of all the people that were vaccinated ended up in the hospital, but none of them died. On the other hand, 97% of the people who are in the hospital with COVID illness did not have the vaccination, and many more of them died. And so the Delta variant, like I said, is very contagious. It's as contagious, they say, as chickenpox. And again, more than one medical expert, I've saw it on the news and I've read about it, have warned that virtually everyone who has not been vaccinated will get the Delta variant of COVID sooner or later. So after what I've seen, and I hope you can do your own research, because I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want you to go seriously think about this. Go look at the pros and the cons. Be objective. Look at the numbers that are out there who've had the COVID shot. Look at the results of that, and look at the numbers who have not had the COVID shot, and look at the results of that. And just decide which one is going to be the smarter choice. So anyway, in my opinion, the risk of not taking the shot seems to be much greater than taking the shot. The risk of a negative reaction or some type of a medical result that may not be pleasant from taking the shot is tiny compared to the risk of getting COVID itself. And here's another thing I've noticed. All of the news medias, and I don't trust the news media, believe me. I believe there's a lot of propaganda out there about everything that you can't hardly believe. But you know, you usually got your left side, your left-wing news media, and your right-wing news media. And of course, they're always completely disagreeing on everything from politics to you name it, just about anything. But this is something I've noticed is strange. The left and the right side are all in agreement about this, about taking the COVID vaccine as a good thing. That's one thing that's very extremely rare. So that causes me to give some notice here that maybe there's some truth to that you're better off to take it than to not take it. So here's another question. You've got some doctors, you've got some guys that have been some that have been with big pharma, and some that have been with big colleges, medical colleges that have studied all this. And they are against the vaccine. They give their reasons, their personal reasons, their opinions about it. But those numbers of those kinds of doctors are very, very few. I call it a handful of doctors compared to the millions of medical experts around the world, and certainly the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in America that are doctors and nurses and that are research scientists and medical people and all that, so have done research and know what they're talking about, who agree that the vaccine is a good thing. So you got a handful over here on one side that say, oh, it's bad to do it, I wouldn't do it, it's dangerous or whatever. Then you got all these huge numbers that say it's a good thing. So my question is this: am I going to believe hundreds of thousands of medical professionals who say taking the COVID shot is a good thing, or am I going to believe a handful of what I call rogue doctors or dissidents, ones who now turned against it for some reason? Who am I going to believe? A handful over here or hundreds of thousands over here? And you know, again, my trust is in the Lord, but still, there's got to be some common sense here, and this doesn't make sense to just believe the handful of rogue doctors or those that have their opinions versus all this evidence and all the hundreds of thousands of medical experts that think it's a good thing. So again, the scripture says we're to be sensible, we're to be reasonable, and we're to be teachable. And that's all I'm asking you to do, is to think about this, to look at the whole picture. Another thing is happening, and I keep seeing this on the news. I see it on the internet news, and I see it on cable news. There are more and more people now that were anti-vaccination people, anti-COVID vaccination people, who are reversing their decision and now are regretting their opposition to the shot. And I'll give you a couple of real life examples here in just a moment. There also is a number of people who were strongly against the vaccine before, who are now speaking out. And here's what I read. They're speaking out from hospital beds. They're speaking out from having gone to funerals. And they're speaking out in obituaries about their regrets and about the pain of enduring the virus, and also about the misery of watching their unvaccinated family members die gasping for breath. That's what I read. And so now we're seeing a change in this. In other words, a lot of people that were so against it are reversing their position. A lady named Mindy Green of Provo, Utah, she stated that she read all kinds of things about the vaccine. Of course, she said it scared her. I mean, if all you read is what they say in the negative, it will scare you. But she didn't look at the big picture, and so she made a decision, I guess with her and her family, to not take the vaccine. You know, the vaccine is dangerous, it's bad, it's terrible, whatever. And so she didn't get the vaccine. Now, as her husband, the father of her 4 children, is hovering between life and death in the hospital, unable to breathe on his own, she says she has incredible guilt and much regret for her decision. She now says that if she'd understood what this was really like, this getting COVID was really like before, she would have gotten the shot, and she would have encouraged others to do so as well. See, so she's completely reversed her opinion on it, because now she's experienced the horrors of what it's like to get COVID, and her husband is hovering between life and death. Now, whether he lived or died, this is a few days old. I don't know how he's doing today. But my point is that she changed her position, because now she has some reality. She doesn't just have the conspiracy theories out there talking to her. She sees reality. Another one, which is even more, I guess, important, is another one who's changed his position, is a guy, he's in Nashville, Tennessee, radio talk show host. His name is Phil Valentine, who now remains in the hospital in critical condition with COVID-19. He's been there for more than 2 weeks after being admitted to the hospital for disease, it says on the internet. Now, this was probably a few days old, so I don't know the exact status today. He, Valentine, who broadcast on Super Talk 99.7 WTN in Nashville, Tennessee, was known and was very vocal for his COVID-19 vaccine skepticism. He continually promoted negative propaganda against the vaccine. Now, Phil Valentine wants people to know that he was wrong. He said, and that he should have taken the vaccine. You know, he's on the verge of life and death right now. He wants others to consider their thoughts on the vaccine. He wants everybody to consider everything. In other words, the pros and the cons. It's back to what I was saying earlier about wisdom. There's a pro and there's a con, which, you know, look at the whole picture. See how it pans out. Not just the cons and not just the pros. Look at everything. And that way you can make a wise decision. That's what he's saying. His brother, Mark, says, because Phil Valentine is struggling to breathe, Mark Valentine has been speaking on his brother's behalf. Workers often, in the hospital, reposition the radio host while he's laying in bed. They reposition him, who is still extremely sick, so fluid doesn't collect in his lungs. Mark says, we're in for the long haul, it looks like. It's just a bad time, his brother says, and he wishes he could do it all over again. The 61-year-old believed he was in a group that didn't need the vaccine. But the virus doesn't discriminate. Young and healthy people can still get sick and end up in the hospital from the disease and even die, he says. The radio host also believed that even after he got sick, he thought he'd just be back on the job in a few days after first getting the virus. Instead, he was very close to death at several points when his oxygen levels dropped very low. His brother says, while Phil Valentine has been communicative, the healthcare workers have encouraged him to sleep as much as possible to save his strength, his brother Mark Valentine says. So, Mark goes on to say a lot of people didn't get the vaccine because, Phil says this, Phil Valentine, who was the radio host, he said a lot of people didn't get the vaccine because I didn't get it. And of course, he was a big influence. And this is what he told his brother Mark. Now Mark is on a mission to spread Phil Valentine's new view on COVID-19 vaccines. So see, he's another one who was strongly against it, who's now completely reversed his position. Now he says, that's my purpose for being here today. That is, Mark was saying that, is to take the message that he's unable to take, his brother who's still in the hospital, and this is the message. Take politics out of it. It's time for us to get together and fight this thing collectively. He says, just put all the conspiracy theories and the microchips and all the business aside and go get vaccinated, and don't put your family through what his wife, that's Phil's wife, and the rest of us are going through now. Mark Valentine understands there's a chance his brother could die. And while he can't change what's already happened to his loved one, he says Phil Valentine's message has inspired others now to get the shot. Mark Valentine says he's heard from dozens of Phil Valentine's listeners who say they received the vaccine because of his brother's dire situation, including Mark Valentine himself. He went to Walmart and got inoculated after seeing what his brother was going through. See, reality sometimes sets in. It's easy to sit at home and have your opinion. Well, I'm not getting the shot. Well, the shot's bad. I read this, I read that, I heard this, I heard that. But when the COVID disease hits you or somebody close to you and you see them struggling for life and you influence them not to get the shot, you can have a complete change of opinion on it, which is what's happening here. In other words, reality sets in. Now you're getting the rest of the story, so to speak. So anyway, he goes on to say Americans can disagree on a lot of issues. Mark Valentine says, but politics aside, his family firmly believes that vaccines can save lives. When Phil Valentine is back on the air, that is if he lives, Mark Valentine says his brother will double down on his new message to get the vaccine. Phil will be the most pro-vaccine person you've ever seen as soon as he is able to be, Mark says. So there you go. There's somebody who learned that there's more to it than just talk. There's more to it than just what you feel. There's more to it than just what you think. There's more to it than just a conspiracy theory. Other news that's reported. Now, COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are rising again as the extremely contagious Delta variant of the coronavirus takes hold as the dominant strain in the U.S. In some parts of the country, there are more hospitalizations and cases of COVID than there were last winter, the peak of the pandemic. The vast majority of people now being hospitalized with COVID and dying from the disease are the ones who haven't been fully vaccinated. According to the public health officials, more than 97% of hospitalizations from COVID right now are of the unvaccinated people. Dr. Roche, Walensky, director of the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, said at a press conference briefing Friday, adding that there's a clear message that is coming through. This is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated. In early July, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the president's chief medical advisor, told CBS that 99 0.2% of COVID deaths are now of unvaccinated people. So, there you go. These are things that must be considered too. Not just the conspiracy theories, not just the anti-vaccine theories and the propaganda, but what about these facts? These are things that we need to think about. Now, I want to remind you some words that Jesus said. Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind." He said, "This is the great and foremost commandment." And he said, "The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." He said, "On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets." So there it is. Love your neighbor as yourself. Like I said, think about it. What if you get COVID and you give it to your husband, your wife, your children, your grandparents, your neighbors, you know, the people you work with, the people that you do things with as friends? What if you cause one of them to get sick, to lose a lung? I read a case where a guy had to have a double lung transplant because of COVID, because it ruined both of his lungs and he would have died. Can you imagine what kind of trauma his life is in to have a double lung transplant? And then another case where a guy had a hole blow in his lung. The disease ate through his lung and he had one lung that completely collapsed because a hole came in it. See, these are terrible things that happen to people because of this disease. How would you feel if you transmitted somebody and something like this happened to them? Much less, how would you feel if they died? So again, what is it to love your neighbors yourself? We got to think about other people. We got to think about our grandparents and our husbands, our wives, our children, our friends, our neighbors. We got to think about everybody, our co-workers. You know, what would happen? How would you feel if something terrible happened because you spread the disease? Because you wouldn't get a shot? Think about it. Another place in the scriptures in Romans 14:22, that, by the way, earlier was Matthew 22, verse 37 through 40, if you want to look it up. In Romans 14:22, Paul says this: "The faith which you have as your own conviction before God. Happy is he who does not condemn himself in what he approves. But he who doubts is condemned if he eats, because his eating is not of faith, and whatever is not of faith is sin." So Paul could say the same thing here. He could say this concerning the COVID shot. But he who doubts is condemned if he gets the shot. In other words, if you get the shot and you doubt that it's the right thing to do, you get it because someone told you had to get it. You get it because you're going on somebody else's faith. He says because you're getting the shot, so to speak, is not from faith, then whatever's not from faith is sin. So here's what I'm saying. I don't want you to get the shot because of what I'm saying today alone. I want you to consider it. I want you to come to a conclusion. I want you to believe that it's the right thing to do. And when you believe it's the right thing to do, then you'll be doing the shot, getting the shot by faith, not because of something I said or something somebody else said. And you won't doubt because of the naysayers, and you won't necessarily just do it because you're wanting to please somebody. But if you do it because you believe it's the best thing. You do it because you believe it's the best thing, considering not only yourself but your neighbors and your friends and your family. And you consider that it makes sense because it's better than not getting it because of the possible results of not getting it. So again, I think the same is with a COVID shot. If you get the shot with doubt, then it's not of faith. Therefore, it's sin. I'm asking all of you to consider what the Lord is saying here. This is not just about you, but it's about others that you could infect if you choose to not get the shot. How would you feel? Again, how would you feel if you caused somebody else to get sick or even to die? And most of you know that me and Rita got the shot. We got the shot as soon as it was reasonably available for us. We by faith believed that the shot was a good thing, and it was good for saving the lives of people and preventing chronic sickness and even death. So we believe that. We also believe that anything that's good comes from God. We believe that because the Scripture says so. So by faith, we gladly got the shot without any fear of anything bad happening to us, because we got it based upon the information we had, is it being better to get it than to not get it. And so we put our trust in the Lord and we got it by faith. There are many conspiracy theories floating around out there about the virus that are against the virus. Some are from well-respected doctors, like I said earlier, or medical professionals that I believe have gone rogue or just have their own opinions for whatever reason. Something's influenced them, I don't know what. And some of them are warning about the so-called long-term effects or possible pregnancy issues, or that our government is wanting to decrease population. I mean, there's some crazy stuff out there. There's a lot of crazy ideas by using the vaccine, you know. None of these types of concerns, though, have been proven. That I can find out, there's no proof on any of them. But they're only opinions and only speculations that do what? What do? They promote fear and doubt. Now, it's true. Yeah, there's no doubt that some people have had serious allergic reactions, a few, like I said earlier, very tiny numbers, to the vaccine. And some others have had some serious and unpleasant reactions to the vaccine as well. Yes, it's happened. It's happened on some small number of occasions. And there's always some risk with taking any vaccine or taking any medication. You know, there's even a risk in taking an aspirin, but it's very small. Some people can't take penicillin, but look at the lives it's saved. And some people, you know, can't take certain types of medication for certain types of reasons, and that's understandable. But for the most part, modern medicine has saved countless lives and relieved the misery of billions of people. That's the fact. So again, you have to look at the whole picture to make a wise decision. So the question always is, does the good outweigh the bad, or does the bad outweigh the good? This again goes back to pros and cons, looking at the whole picture and considering everything, not just how you feel about it, but what are the facts. Something else I want to remind you of: God is not the author of fear. The fear-mongering messages that are coming through the conspiracy theories, they're not coming from God. God warns us from the scriptures, but He's not promoting fear and panic. So God's not the author of fear, and people who focus just on the fear, and the ones who focus just on the negative stuff without looking at the whole picture, they also promote and spread more fear, which that's not the work of God either to do that. And just like Phil Valentine, the talk show radio host I read to you about earlier, he spent a lot of energy and time spreading rumors of fear and doubt to many, many people who listen to his radio program all the time. But he did that until he nearly died from COVID. Now he's singing a different song. Now he has a different opinion. You know, to tell people not to get the COVID shot because of all these conspiracy theories and fears and stuff that are being promoted, it'd be like telling somebody never to go to the hospital. No matter what happens to you, never to go to the hospital, because at the hospital, people die there. There's a lot of people that die at hospitals. And so, of course, it's true that, you know, there's people that go in the hospital and they go out the back door, you know, to the morgue because they died there at the hospital. But if you only focus on the fact that some people die when they go to the hospital, and that's all the information you had, and that's all the information you considered, that's the only thing you thought about was when people go to the hospital, they die, without considering the fact, or even looking at the other side of the picture, of the tremendously big, huge, vast numbers of people whose lives were saved at hospitals, or who were cured of diseases they otherwise wouldn't have been cured at the hospital, or had surgeries at the hospital that transformed their lives and saved them from miserable injuries and various chronic diseases and so forth. If you didn't consider all that and what modern medicine has done in the hospitals, you would never go to a hospital. Well, that's the same thing, you know, in my opinion, it's the same thing that's going on with the COVID vaccine. People are only looking at a few cases where there were negative outcomes of people getting the vaccine versus the millions and the billions of people that are having positive outcomes around the world. And so If you only focused on the unproven conspiracy theories and speculations and things that are going on, reports about fear and worry about what it can do to you, and you don't consider all the good that's being done from the vaccine, all the lives that have been saved, all the people that have been prevented from catching the virus that could have either killed them or made them extremely sick, then if you only consider that, then you're not being wise. God said to be wise. Scripture in Proverbs is just riddled with words about wisdom and talking about wisdom. We're supposed to be wise people. So here's another thing. If a lot of these conspiracy theories about the vaccine are promoted and spread by people who are already bent towards anti-government theories and anti-medical theories, anti-big pharma, it's all a conspiracy, the medical thing. You've heard all this, or anti-authority. We don't want anybody telling us or controlling our lives. And some of these people get into we should only have all natural cures for sickness or disease, or we should only eat certain kinds of foods and avoid these other foods, And there's all kinds of these healing and anti this and anti that doctrines floating around, and a lot of these people that promote these type of fears and theories of conspiracies and so forth are part of that. Often it's not much more than just pure pride and rebellion in people to think they know more than the masses of research scientists and doctors, or they know more than anybody else, or they're smarter than our government. And they're just against authority, and they're just against other things that would try to point to them in a different direction. And so they're just sort of rebellious by nature. So I want to remind you that there's no authority except that which is established by God, including our federal government, our local government, our police department, our military. Those are authorities. I know they're not perfect, and I know they're not like just godly institutions always, but they are the authorities that God has placed in our life. We should obey the law, and we should follow the guidelines and instructions of our government as long as they don't go against God or against our conscience of what we believe strongly that's right, based upon the Scriptures. Not based upon opinions, but based upon the Scriptures. So anyway, Romans 13:1 says, every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which is from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. So here's what the questions really boil down to, because this is about more than just a vaccine or medical stuff or diseases. This is really, as Christians, it's more than that. So I raised three major questions here in all that I've shared with you. The first one is, are you walking in love with your neighbor? In your decision making about the COVID-19 vaccine, are you walking in love with your neighbor? And I've already explained that consideration. The second question is the decision you're making about the vaccine, whether to take it or not take it, is it based on fear or is it based upon faith? So, you got to answer that question, because if it's not faith, if you don't do it or you do it, if you do it because of fear, not by faith, it's sin to you. And the third thing is, are you making your decision about the COVID vaccine based upon all the facts, or are you just basing it upon one side of the information you're receiving? So the question then would be, are you wise or are you foolish? So those are three things. Are you walking in love with your neighbor? Is your decision based upon fear or faith? And are you being wise or foolish? These are very important questions. These are spiritual questions that really point back to why you're not taking the COVID vaccine, or why you are taking the COVID vaccine. What are you basing it upon, your decision? What's it based upon? So I want to explain to you that I am not telling you that you have to get the shot. I can't do that. I don't have the authority to do that. It's not my place to do that. But what I'm asking you to do is I'm asking you to consider everything and to do your own research, to pray to the Lord God, and to come to a wise decision that's based upon all the information that you can find out, both pros and cons, and to do it in faith and do it with consideration of loving your neighbor as yourself and putting your trust in God. That's what I'm asking you to do. That's what I'm wanting you to do. That's what I'm trying to get you to do. And also remember this. Keep your mind on things above. You know, sometimes we get caught up in all these conspiracy theories and it's all just physical and it's all just what's on the earth. But there's more to it. There's a heavenly realm, there's a spiritual realm, and there's God, and there's the things of God and the kingdom of God. So let's look at the kingdom of God and say, what is the Lord really saying to us? So let's keep our mind on things above and not just on the earth. You know, up above and not just on the earth. So, and don't get the shot just because Rita and I did. Don't go out and say, well, Don and Rita got shot, so we're going to get the shot. No, don't do it because of that. You come to a conclusion where you do it by faith because you believe in your heart it's the right thing for you to do. And so let it be your own decision based upon that you made yourself, based upon everything you've considered and the prayers that you prayed, and that you've done it by faith. And you're acting from faith, not from just influence or suggestion, or either not doing it because of conspiracy theories or are doing it because we did it or any other reason. Be sure that you go to God, you look at the whole picture, and you are fully convinced in your own heart what to do. That's what I'm asking you to do. And I'm saying this to you. May the Lord guide you as each of you seek Him on this matter, and may you conclude to do whatever you do by faith, putting your trust in the Lord. Thank you for listening to me on this.